very fortunate to be the coordinator for the Totem Committee. I will explain in detail. On my left, we have Professor Aloiddin, who is the head of the Medical Device Group at UKM, Faculty of Engineering. And we are very fortunate to have him and the other students, graduates, and colleagues that are working with us. His main area is microelectronics, so system chip design, but he also is on other topics related to medical instrumentation again. On the other side, we have Siti Nur Hidayah. She has a master in biomedical engineering from UTHM, sorry. And currently she is my research assistant and planning to do a PhD. So on this side we have Farida. She is my other research assistant and she is also an electrical engineer. They are helping me on various projects. I extremely helpful in various projects, including the program on HTI innovation. So the best thing perhaps to do is to give you a brief overview of who we are in more detail and why we are here, what do we expect from this exercise today, and with many thanks to the leader and to Chila to have arranged this meeting. Can we go next slide? So we have formed a committee that looks into the problem of healthcare technology innovation. Initially, the plan was to start a master program, a new master program in, you don't need to use HTI to make it short. And we have formed a committee to look into that proposal, formed of members from the Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Medicine, and Faculty of Allied Health. So the idea was to streamline the already existing collaboration because we have lots of ongoing projects that are on a personal basis. One of us at the engineering faculty knows one partner on your side, and we have a project that is going on very well. We thought perhaps it's a good time to formalize and have a formal master program. However, in order to reach this master program, as you know, UTM is very strict on new programs, needs lots of documentation, lots of justification, and we would like to do something that is very efficient. So we decided to go step by step and organize a series of workshops. And this is why we have started doing the first workshop last year in June. So the idea was put forward in 2012, and in 2013 this Totem Committee was formed, and in June we had our first workshop. We had the opportunity and honor of having the leader and a few of you. So in the first workshop we had invited a delegation from the Singapore Biodesign Program, and they came in and they shared with us knowledge about the innovation process. So it's quite a methodological approach. And then we took the participants also to a hands-on workshop on electronic rapid prototyping, and then we continued on mechanical rapid prototyping. This time, what we are doing is to replicate the first part of this workshop. So in September 2014, this year, we plan to have a second workshop, and in this workshop, we propose to learn about need identification and need screening. I will explain in the next slide what it is all about. So we are going to concentrate on need identification and need screening. Next slide. We will carry on doing the conceptual designs about the needs that have been screened, and then concept screening. So we will take the ideas from the initial stage, the fetal stage, and slowly get into more and more progressive concepts. Next slide. Okay, now the question might be, what is need identification and need screening about, and why do I need to know about these items? Well, the thing is that there are lots of problems everywhere. But do we have the resources to tackle them? Resources are always limited. And perhaps not all problems are equally attractive to be the focus of interest, and we shouldn't spend time on all problems equally. There are criteria, there are engineering challenges, there are management challenges to solve each of these problems. And the final word is that the solution has to be cost effective. So depending on the methodology that you adopt, perhaps some problem that you can see is a need, or it's not really a need, it's something else that is badly expressed. Then, okay, once we have the need and we know that it is a real need, it satisfies the criteria, what next? Well, you have to come with a concept in order to address this need, right? But usually we come with multiple concepts. There are different ways of doing the same, of solving the same problem. So what we do is that we are going to introduce methodologies during the workshop that will also screen these concepts. So we'll have a workshop consisting of medical and industry partners sitting together and then generating these concepts and then screening for these concepts according to proven methodology. When I say proven methodology, we are not the inventors of this proven methodology. You have a nice program that is going on since 2000 in Stanford University under the name of biodesign. You have all the information on the web. And then they have kind of hubs. One hub is in Singapore. This is the hub that we are linked to. So, why are we here now? The thing is that during the first workshop, the team that led us in the need screening and concept generation and all of these stages introduced us to problems that were not local relevant problems to us and to our environment, were problems that were applicable outside. I mean, the problems from outside. We came to the conclusion during our internal meetings that why not we work on real, genuine problems that are actually bothering you and us at the same time. And we spend energy to solve and to approach these problems. So, the idea is to get as much possible of these ideas and to put it to this workshop. So I want to be extremely clear here. We want to have ideas about the problems that you have here. You may have a solution or you may not have a solution for it, but the workshop that we are going to organize, which will consist of engineers and you together, we are going to look into these problems using a proven methodology. So, the fact finding is exactly doing that in terms of getting these topics from your side, documenting them, and preparing them, compiling them for the day of the workshop. That is why we are here. Next slide. Okay, now I have lots of questions. I know, okay, what is the level of complexity that we expect this project to be? Well, absolutely any level, because the methodology that we will introduce and we will use will be in charge of tackling with these problems. So it's the methodology that is strong enough to tackle any problem. And we are going to take care of the filtering according to this methodology. The target is roughly 25, 30 perhaps topics for each faculty, and medical. Okay, when I say any level, yes, it is really any level, because most of the ideas are abstract ideas. You have had not time to think about it. You know that this problem does exist. You really don't have, you haven't had time to think about the solution. And you just express it. This is the basic level of entry. Then you can go to the next level. You have done some thinking about the problem, you know what the problem is about and what might be the solution. And the next level would be you have even gone further, you have a sketch. The next level would be you have a prototype of it. I mean, it can be from any level. But the emphasis would be on simple ideas, less advanced ideas. Because we think that simple ideas, simple problems that you are faced with and you don't have any solution for it right now will be larger in numbers. And it's the number that counts. Why the number counts? Because we want to do screening during the workshop. So if we go to the workshop with 2 or 3 topics, it wouldn't be fair to the participants. So we want a large pool of topics, then the participants will have the duty of using the methodology that we will be sharing with them during the workshop to screen them and to tune them. They have a good feeling. Well, I have listed here some of the ideas. Let's say at the emergency department, we were approached by one medical colleague who was telling us, listen, I want somebody on the emergency bed, and he or she feels that it's okay, I can walk. He leaves the bed and falls down, and we are in trouble. Can you do something to detect the movement of the subject? It's as simple as that. The problem is stated very clearly. I need some system that can take care of telling me that the patient is leaving the bed. And that's very critical for them. The patient doesn't think about this. We have lots of other things that the idea can start from very, very simple idea. Next slide. Even simpler ideas, we can go like how to avoid contaminating the door. I mean, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, I prefer to do it this way. Even edutainment of patients in the waiting room could be something that is not touching directly on the physical procedure itself, but it affects the emotional states of the patients when they come to see you. We claim that we can approach all these problems because of the methodology that is strong enough. It is a proven methodology, so the idea can visually be at any stage of development. And let me share you the sample of questions that we will be asking. We are going to ask what is the gap that this procedure, this new device, new software is going to fill in. And these are the universal questions that we are going to ask. So whatever is the stage, we are going to approach them using the same methodology, the same tool. Next question that may come to your mind is that, okay, I have an idea, but I don't know how crazy is that idea. Do I need to have done my patent search? Is it patented? Market research? How big is the market for this, etc.? I have an idea, but I really haven't had time to go and dig into the details. The answer is, this is the workshop duty. The participants will do that exactly. This is how they will do this screening. So this is why we need lots of ideas, and they will be screening this for you. And at the end of the workshop, the result, and this is the advantage, one of the advantages of the workshop, all of these documents, the brainstorming, the result of the brainstorming will be put at your disposition. Next slide. Please start by stating the problem. The one pitfall that I would like to emphasize is that to approach the problem from a solution perspective. Sometimes we have in mind a specific way of solving a problem, and the danger would be to polarize ourselves on the solution. So instead of thinking about the solution, initially we would like to go to the bottom of the problem. What is really the problem about? You will be surprised, most of the time, we don't know exactly what is the problem. We are so preoccupied by the solution that we forget about the details of the problem. And if we cannot formulate exactly analytically a problem, it is very difficult to tackle later. So, what do we expect at the end of this exercise that we are here right now? Well, you have some forms that have been distributed, and you have a few colors in these forms. We would like to have your feedback on these forms that we could collect today, preferably, or we can get it next week when we have the HTI meeting. And in this form, as you can see, you have. Can you swap to the document file? I have uploaded the dump file. On that, we move to the document. The dump is open. It's open. It's open. You have reported by would be your name. I mean the name of the person who is gathering this information. Then you have the short title. The short title would be a title for us to refer to this project. You are in a better position. We are going to have a discussion later on. We will see how it works. The person in charge would be the contact person from your side. Who is the person who is the originator of the idea? Because we will link actually this idea to your name. And who will be the person who can provide us with further information shall we require this information. A brief description is the next column. This is very critical to give us the problem statement. What is the problem? So please refrain from giving a solution here, but put as much as you can of details about the problem itself. What is the problem? And anything that we cannot fit in the other columns, you can use the comments. Later on, we can review this form again. So what would be the advantage of sharing all of these problems with us? Go to window, view. Well, the problems will be evaluated using a proven methodology. That is the first advantage. And once the problem is selected, you will have the opportunity of having graduate students from engineering and ourselves who will be seated down at the same table and working on concepts that could address your problem. And all of these will be documented, more or less, so the level of documentation will be depending on the participant willingness, but this is why we encourage you yourself to participate in this workshop, to be part of the documentation process. So at the end of the day, you can get the benefit of having all this feedback, all this information to you. What will happen, another problem that is in our mind is that, okay, I have an idea, but perhaps later on I want to attempt it, I want to do something with it. Well, we link the idea, the problems that you have expressed to your name. And until the end, this will be linked. So this is completely yours, and you will be retaining any kind of IP rights should this become a very big thing later on that we will report. And the other advantage also is that by you attending this workshop and your project being discussed within this workshop, you will have a network of technical people that can assist you. Okay, well, what next if we have a problem that is screened, the variable problem is here, and then the concept has been generated, and the concept has been screened, and it looks like promising. Then what next? Well, there are a few possibilities. You can define your own project. You can start your own project using the network of engineers and technical persons that you are linked with, or we plan to have other workshops in order to get a little bit more in detail about how this could be fabricated, how this concept can be transformed from the paper phase to real existing phase, which is a software or hardware-based system. So we are going to have a series of workshops on electronic, informatics, and mechanical rapid prototyping. So how to rapidly, quickly transform this product, these ideas, this concept into a workable prototype. All right, I think that's all, and I thank you again for the time given to us. And now I pass over to the leader.
How would you like to go after this? The staff members presenting their projects, or
perhaps one way would be to emulate the session that we had recently at the emergency department with under Prof. Ismail. What happened is that we asked Prof. Ismail, asked his staff and the other lecturers from the other departments to come forward and, well, feel completely free to share with us their problems. Initially, they were not sure whether this is a real problem, it's not a real problem, but slowly we were quite overwhelmed by the response, and at the end of this session, I was able to take note of 17 different projects that are good projects. And later on, we had Dr. Karai, who went to the response. How was the response?
We have 200 of them. The forms I think now with
Of Ismail. Right. So, Prof. Ismail, at the end of the session, he said that perhaps we could open up this exercise to the whole faculty. So yesterday, Kalaimanishi went to make a presentation, and Prof. Ismail also distributed the same forms, and we are waiting for the numbers. Prof. Ismail was a little bit worried by the number of, so I told him if we have too many, what we will do is that we will come back to you. We are not going to screen. We are not going to screen. We will get back to you, and we will kind of put a priority in these projects, and then we will select those with highest priority. Because to be fair to the participants also, we cannot overwhelm them with 200 projects. It's no more, right? But I'm not worried about the 200 now.
I just had the presentation yesterday. PPUKM was at the faculty meeting, so it's just a short notice to everyone about the form. If you want to follow the same procedure. Yeah. Up to you.
Please.
can I just ask, because you've been to medical faculty, and at the same time, some of us here have also had some collaboration with the medical faculty. So, is it possible to get some ideas on what they're proposing, just in case we don't duplicate the ideas? I'm not sure whether that's possible or not.
I think at this stage, please do not be concerned about this issue, because the topics that they have is quite varied from wide area, and apparently they haven't done any. There is no progress in these ideas. This is just expression of interest, statement of interest that there is this project. I mentioned to you one problem is the other problem that they shared with us was the identification of empty beds. Simple as that. They said that chasing for the empty bed, because the patients, they keep moving, they keep being transferred from one bed to another bed, sometimes it's a headache for them, and they are quite overwhelmed by this problem. Another problem that, what was the other topics? Few topics.
they want to emergency department. They have this, they need to check that.
Yes, right. Was it a spasm or something that they swallowed?
No, it's every drop.
Airway drop, right.
So they want some extra.
One other topic was the airway drop, and they wanted to see whether we could, or it was possible, it's not we, it was possible to develop an instrument that is non-invasive, because you cannot, they couldn't infuse any tubing or something, to detect whether there is a collapse in the airway of the subject, and how bad was it, because the voice becomes hoarse at that time. This is what we were able to understand. these very, very rough ideas, we need to sit down again another round and dig with them later on. But this is good enough to start the lead. This is the lead, right? Another topic was the handover of they said that during emergency, once they want to hand over the patients, it took a lot of time. They wanted to have a system that is much faster, much more efficient. So and the good thing is that we asked them to visualize what is the ideal situation for them. So they told us, like in the airport, you have the airplanes that with the departure time, etc. So everything is done manually, and we have a panel, whereas all the information will be centralized and displayed on the panel and updated. And some of the projects are interrelated. For example, tracking the patient is interrelated because if you track the patients, then you can monitor and link this information to the central system. So patterns are emerging here. It's quite free. Please feel free to express anything.
Like yesterday, after my presentation, the first suggestion was to make a bed to transfer patient from one bed to another.
Yeah.
Yeah, the room they carry, then they carry. So they said there's many problems in that. So
They have poles and sliders, but they all are very expensive. I think
Exactly. You will notice, this is exactly true. You will notice that in most of the cases there are solutions. There are already solutions. But the solution is not used because of cost effectiveness, it's costly, or there's a management problem, there's a procedural problem, etc. So during the screening phase, we'll take care of eliminating these conditions or making recommendation. Okay, this is not really an innovation. If I need this product and it is available on the market, well, the only thing I need is a little bit of money to go and buy it, right? So it's not really innovation. This is what we mean by screening.
so. Does it mean that if you have an idea, but the product is already available in the market, only thing is that you can't afford it, and you want to make with a local product which is more cheaper, that's not more innovation then?
It can be innovation if you can introduce some elements that genuinely makes it cheaper. For example, you have a device that is coming from a foreign manufacturer that has too many features, and you don't use these features. A very simple device could make it, or you use local materials, you make it cheaper. These kind of things.
Anybody wants to start the ball rolling?
The problem. We'd like to focus on the problem. Yes, please. Yes, please. I think it's better you use it because
Well, I will several
very good. If you don't mind, please, because I have asked our assistant and the person in charge of taking, because we will record later on so that we can listen back to these problems. Because taking notes during the thing, and we will ask you to fill in the form for us later on. But yes, please.
I mean, as healthcare providers, I mean, we've got sometimes problems in communication with the patients. It can be anybody, it can be a health therapist, it can be a medical doctor, anybody, any healthcare provider. We've got this common problem of miscommunication or lack of communication. And because of that, it causes a lot of anxiety to the patient, to the family, because they don't understand. It's not just language. Sometimes because of lack of time, the doctor says, oh, we don't have time to explain about the particular disease to the patient. And the patient just years, they're so worried without knowing what's going to happen to their and can there could even be a wrong understanding of things. Sometimes, we don't have enough, we always say, doctors say, we don't have time to explain. So we just keep quiet and let them, and we do what we think is best. But actually, just a simple understand and communicate explanation could be solve the problem. But we don't go to that level, And because of that, that creates a lot of tension in family, relatives, not knowing what's the situation, what's going to happen, what are the options, alternatives. These are all in the minds of the doctors or the health advisors, but they don't. I don't know whether they don't have time or they don't know or they, what's the problem. And this causes a lot of
Is it, can I ask you, is it a problem due to lack of time or lack of time?
Could be multifactorial. It could be multifactorial. Yeah. All affects the problem. It could be due to different levels of
Education,
education.
perhaps, yeah.
So we could dissect it.
Right.
This is the problem. And what it causes a lot of anxiety for the patient and for the family members, not knowing what's happening. And that will cause a lot of finger pointing. If anything happens to the patient, look, this is the doctor's fault, they're not doing their best, and It's just because of miscommunication. Actually, we can explain why you're doing this, but that doesn't happen. Unfortunately. Okay, that's
It's a complex problem.
it's complex. The other one is, I've been thinking about this for quite some time, is regarding, as a common lay person in Malaysia, a lot of times we catch a problem among our children, especially when we're talking about children. Say developmental problems, autism, attention deficit problems, we catch it quite late. Because the parents, one is maybe knowledge, but sometimes if they do know something wrong with their child, they don't know where to go, what to do, who to see. And sometimes they don't even know the problem is very severe. It can cause problems later on. A lot of times this is due to ignorance, but sometimes even knowing it, they don't have proper channel to go. There's not proper referral system in our health system where we can easily find out, okay, this child is not normal, and where's the flow, where's the referral system. Okay, let's say you just say when you have to go to the hospital, but then we have the right people to see it, to filter this out and catch this problem. And when they do catch this problem, who are the people going to refer to? And is the system there? And at the moment it's very, I can say just by luck. Okay, just coincidence that, okay, I know this particular psychologist who I can refer. If I don't know, then I don't know what to do. I can help. I can help. So this is the problem. I'm worried about the children. We catch a lot of these problems, developmental problems, dyslexia quite late, and we could have caught it much earlier. Comparing this to the West where they have better system, I think. But I'm not sure whether in our context in Malaysia we can have this sort of system whereby we can help the lay people in the villages.
Is the problem a lack of large-scale screening? Am I correct?
There's no screening.
No, I mean, is the problem of large-scale? Can I say that the problem is the lack of large-scale screening among children?
Could be. I don't know.
The pediatrician in Malaysia doesn't do native scanning. We don't have a native scanning. The shrines there, they go through things like hearing, vision, and all that, but not screening. Most of the time it's detected in school, when they're already in primary school, 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So it's pretty late, because like autistic now can be detected at 8 months. As early as 8 months in the They have
development. Is there a problem of the parents actually denial?
Could be something. I've known very educated parents,
Yes.
very educated parents,
You're very right.
who has waited up until this boy is already in the teens to really realize that something's wrong with my child.
Our survey says educated parents, most of them is denial. But the non-educated or ignorant, they are much more interested because normally they have a lot of trouble with the child. The anger, the attention, and all of that.
Innovation 3.0.
Yeah, I think this is what I
So, sorry, I will ask you to introduce yourself so that on the video we can remember your name and we can tally these problems. So, Hidayah, please.
Okay, I am Shobha Sharma. Hi. My area, as I mentioned earlier to you, is in swallowing disorders and telemedicine, telerehabilitation. So that's my focus, I suppose. But being from the speech pathology program, I think about children and adults alike. So we would like to cater to a larger population. There are very, very few speech pathologists globally as well as in Malaysia. So what ends up happening is the option of telerehabilitation is possible, yes. Technically, theoretically, it would work in Malaysia. And I need to unfortunately emphasize technically and theoretically. Practically, it's not, it's probably extremely at infancy. It's probably at full stage. It's not even gone much more than that. Various reasons, acceptance, infrastructure availability, internet connectivity, computers, etc., and just the general awareness. Couple of areas in speech pathology would be just to provide speech pathology services to children and adults alike at a remote location. Okay, so clinician is on one end, patients on the other end. They tie in online via, usually it's a dedicated and designated kind of server or program that connects only these two parties. It's not over the internet per se. It's not via Skype, although it can be used. Security becomes issues, etc., etc. So these things are available overseas, quite advanced in the US and Canada and Australia. However, to purchase such a unit in the local scene is going to be ridiculously expensive. Okay? There are some features, add-on features, which are available, and the clinician can control how much to zoom into the patient's neck, for example, if you need to assess swallowing, that kind of thing. So those are technical stuff that I'm sure can be resolved somehow. You definitely would have the expertise of computers as well as engineering who can figure something out. But in my specific area of swallowing, we have an issue with something called laryngeal penetration and aspiration, which is the entry of food and fluid into the airway. Very similar to what you just mentioned about the airway collapse, etc. So this is the issue with food and fluid going into the airway or the lungs, and that can in turn cause pneumonia, specifically related to food or fluids. Yeah? So that again causes further complications. It's called aspiration pneumonia and can eventually and potentially lead to death. Okay? Currently, the gold standards for assessing aspiration of the fluids into the lung is radiographic or via endoscopy, which not everyone's able to tolerate for various reasons. I don't know how you do it. If there is some way of scanning, detecting, there are studies that have shown that by placing a laryngeal stethoscope kind of unit that you can listen to the sounds of swallowing. But listening to the sound of swallowing requires a lot of expertise, and not too many people in the world have this expertise. So if you can come up with something that can actually detect, in combination with this airway collapse thing, where there is a possibility of the patient having the food and fluid going in the wrong way. Not necessarily the right way, but just telling us it's going in wrongly. Or something along that line.
So the problem would be a system that could detect where the food has been
whether there's something that is going into the lung.
into the lung.
Or into the airway, not even lung. We don't want to get down into the lung that much. That's too far down, no.
Has entered the lung.
Sorry, it has entered the airway. So as you mentioned, the person's voice is going to sound exactly like what my voice sounds right now. Very, very coarse, very wet. And that's a signal that the food and fluids are sitting exactly on the vocal folds, just about to get into the airway. So that is one thing. The second thing is, sorry.
How does this relate to tele-psychotherapy? You want to do it on a
No, it could be done in a remote basis as well, because very few again are trained in this area. So one thing is if this is directly with the patient. Okay, so if this equipment, unit, whatever is available to the patient and has the potential to detect this, any clinician, irrespective of where the clinician is, can use it. And if they're not comfortable enough to manage the patient completely, they can zoom in, possibly via tele-rehabilitation, via another system, which is my problem number 2, to any clinician who they feel is an expert, qualified enough, comfortable enough, something like that for a support system. Or if they need to zoom into Dr. No and say, seek medical advice, they could, something like that. The second thing is, as I mentioned, the issue of using free-for-all Skype, free-for-all TeamViewer, etc. kind of programs to do tele-rehabilitation, which is what Malaysia is kind of sort of doing. There is nothing wrong ethically in using it. However, the security systems are not guaranteed. And therefore, patient files may, in some process of transfer, may be available on the web. Okay? So patient confidentiality is compromised. So if there could be a designated system where only these two parties are linked together, video conferencing, secure video conferencing effectively. But the problem is, from our side, assuming that I'm the tele-clinician, I would need to possibly zoom in directly towards your mouth. I don't need to see the rest of you. I must be able to control, without the patient having to do anything at all, I must be able to control from my side the camera that zooms your computer's web camera directly to whichever location I need. And that kind of is not only specific to speech or swallowing or anything, that can be pretty much medical. If someone needs to zoom into the person's skin, they could. So something like that, some technology that is able to control the other parties, the remote computer. It is available in Australia, but as I said, extremely expensive. And each unit is in a few thousands in Australia, so that is the second, third, whatever's problem. For equipment-wise, for speech pathology, we use the surface EMGs as biofeedback for patients to swallow, to do oral motor exercises, to strengthen their jaw muscles, oral muscles, etc. All these equipments are obviously from overseas, and when you do the actual conversion of exchange rates, etc., and you actually get it to hand, it's gone in the millions. If there is a if there is a way of developing something locally, I mean, the technology is there, the intelligence is certainly there. It's a matter of putting these two together and getting something like a surface EMG or a nasal cannula which measures airflow. Putting all this together, even in separate units, not necessarily in one big package, that can be cost effective, that is local, and yeah, and you know, it improves treatment tremendously across the board. And a lot of these like surface EMG and nasal prompts for respiratory systems and all are common in the medical world. It is not specific to speech pathology. So you're reaching out to a greater medical population than you are to only speech pathology or something. That's all I have for now. That's all.
I have one question. I do come across saying that some of the software developed in the US or other part of the world is not suitable for Asian population.
Concern of Asian population not fitting into rehab equipment and others from the other part of the world. That will be a very interesting task for us to look into this innovation program. Because I think now our population has aged, especially in Malaysia, also Southeast Asia. Our young country now is only Vietnam and Cambodia. The rest of us, I think, in the same shoes of age. So increasing number of aging population and longer survival period has actually pushed all of us, especially healthcare, into looking into better support to this community. Because currently this community is actually undergoing life stress. They do not know how to manage because they are the group there which do not have, do not plan for their retirement well because their earlier, the parents or the earlier generation didn't have to go through this. And this generation is kind of a gap. I think all of us are very well equipped. We have a prudential card, until 100 years, 80 years kind of thing. But the current group in between age 50 to 70 is suffering. And most of the time it's rehab. They need rehab help. And it should be cheaper, of course, and also something suitable for them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Speaking of just rehab, I mean, think about how parking was at UKMMC or Hospital XYZ. To get a person with a disability to a rehab facility in itself is a challenge. And unfortunately, all our rehab buildings, for some reason, are in the furthest sections of the hospital, the furthest away from the parking levels. And we're so disabled friendly. It's like, recently I saw a signboard at the ground floor. It says the clinic is on first floor. If you need help, please contact the counter on second floor. So it really doesn't make it doesn't make the life of a disabled individual any easier. So as an aging society, we really need to look into rehab. But while we're zooming into rehab, it must also be cost effective to be able to spread out to the rest of the medical world as well, not just rehabers.
I'm going around the table, so my turn. So my name is Hashira, and I'm the head of Speech Sciences program, where Shoba and I are from. So I'm just going to continue from where Shoba has started. The one thing that the program wants, or the school wants, is to get the tele rehab thing really going, and we have had a lot of challenges in doing that. Because when we do get that started, a lot of other disorders can be also using that. Like if we want to do treatment for those who are stuttering or who have a fluency problem, those who have just simple articulation problem, they don't have to travel like 2 hours to get to our clinic, have a 45-minute session, and then go back. Things like speech problems, usually you will need like consistent and like a block of therapy. So getting people to come like once a week, it's kind of like difficult for parents. So a lot of the time they're going to opt for, oh, can I see you like once a month or once in 2 weeks? That in itself is going to reduce efficacy. So tele-rehab is something that is going to be helpful. So they can come first for the assessment, and then some modeling for the first couple of sessions, and then to monitor the progress we can do via tele-rehab. That's really helpful. Again, we need like, myself, I work closely with children with cleft lip and palate. So one of the things is to monitor their speech sound production. So that in itself, I would really need like equipment that I could record how their speech was before, and then what kind of errors that they're doing, and then give feedback, and then recording it and listening to it again. So those things are very important. The other thing is for children with cleft lip and palate, or dysarthria adults, we need some kind of biofeedback sensory system. So we have this thing called EPG, palatography, but I've never used it. I don't know how, but it's very good for patients to actually feel and have a sense of where the tongue is or what's the tongue doing. The thing is like, okay, can you move the back of your tongue towards the back of your throat? Like we have to give instructions like that to patients, and it's very hard for them to actually do it. So if you have a system that, if you're wearing an EPG, that you could say, you could look at the device and you could look at which part is highlighted. You can say, okay, go back towards, and you have that visual support as well. That would be fantastic, because a lot of children with cleft lip and palate, they kind of like develop bad habits or a wrong placement where they put different parts of their mouth. So that's one that I'm really keen on getting. And also the other thing for speech language pathologists, we have a very high, we only have like about 200 speech language pathologists in this country right now, and that's really, really not enough. So in terms of getting access for service, even if we had that early screening and there were like lots of children that need communication, like need speech therapy, I don't think we can provide enough services. So a lot of innovation that we're thinking about in terms of having like group therapy sessions, or the other area that is like now everywhere globally they're using is a lot of parent training. So we're trying to like train our parents to carry out therapy. So in that sense, we want like resources, modules, videos, things like that we could actually just do and then they can carry out. Another thing that I've discussed with a couple of us, is that we are now moving towards using a lot of apps, different apps, that they have amazing apps actually, but they're all in English. So when I work with children with cleft lip and palate, and some of them can read like basic English books, so the storybook actually records the speech, and then say, okay, now let's listen to that, and then the kids were like more motivated to try it, instead of me saying, can you try that again, can you try that again? 5 times I do that, and they were done, they're not going to follow me. So those kind of apps we don't have, especially in Malay, or in Tamil, or in Mandarin. Basic storybooks in Malay, we don't have those either. Very, very limited. So apps for children with autism, apps for children with cleft lip and palate, just basic apps in Malay. So we're lacking in that.
Okay, because you mentioned also about the telemedicine and telerehabilitation, just want to share with you. We started in 2001, the project. End of project on telemedicine actually. And this touches us right when we think we can be very, very efficient. So the good news is that on the aspect of telemethodology, telemedicine, and so on, the side less good aspect of it is the cost involved in management that what is the correct way of doing, and this has been filtered, screened by a group of experts. And the good news here is that the new Vice Chancellor is very supportive of this kind of ideas. And he's aware of the program, he's aware of this particular program. And we have the backup of the Dean of the Medical Faculty, we have the backup of the Law Dean as well. So half of the work has been done, so to say. So if we can tune down during this workshop or either, because this is personal interest in me in the telerehabilitation, telemedicine thing, if we can tune down, we can zoom down on a particular solution, and we can prove to the higher management that this is the way to go. I have high hopes that they will accept this as an expert advice, because it's not one person that is saying this, it's a group who has worked it out. So this could be another kind of fruit that we can get from this exercise.
Yeah, and we would be the university that's going to be training our future students into tele-rehab, and that would be interesting, because right now we don't have much in our curriculum except when Shoba comes back. We have like 1 hour lecture or 2 hour lectures on it, but in terms of practicality of using it, there's actually none.
Well, this pretty much opens up completely into rehab. It's not necessarily only for speech. Tele-rehab encompasses any form of rehabilitation. So it could be optometry, it could be physio, it could be occupational therapy. Anyone who needs to use this. So as you so rightly pointed out, it just changes from tele-rehab to tele-dermatology, tele-pediatrics, tele-whatever. So, sorry? Yeah, tele-speech pathology. So, yes. But again, when you talk about high management, would that be from UKM per se?
Well, we start by UKM, and then perhaps we will take up the COPL.
Well, I did, as part of my PhD work, I did a survey within each hospital, government hospital in Malaysia. I interviewed all speech pathologists as to whether or not they knew anything about tele-rehab. Obviously, 1 or 2 had heard about it, but not kind of sort of knowing anything about it, which is fine. The IT personnel, I also interviewed the heads of IT in each hospital around the country. Unfortunately, this didn't get published yet. The knowledge of the usage of computers and computer systems in itself, even at very, very basic level, is confined to, I can use Word, I can use Excel, I can use Microsoft, They're not able to think outside the box. While everything is in the hospital setting, they're not able to think more than documentation. The IT personnel, for whatever reason, maybe it's training, maybe it's just perception, whatever it might be, are still very much document-based. So they're saying, okay, we can do online notes, case notes online, and that's as far as it goes. We're not talking about that. We're talking live. We're talking about face-to-face equivalents of rehab, of therapy, of medicine, of consultation, of whatever. It's got to be real time. As well as you've got to use store and forward technology, so the recording is not happening over the internet. It's happening at the patient's end. And so you eliminate any, or you minimize, not eliminate, you minimize the effects of internet connectivity or slowing or buffering or any of that stuff. When you're, like Hashira said, you're assessing a patient with stuttering, for example, or stammering, and you don't know really, when you're doing tele-rehab, you don't know whether it's a result of slowing bandwidth or whether it is, the patient's actually stuttering. So yes, on-site at patient end would be good. And similar, I can think of that in the physio world. when you're talking about a patient with Parkinson's who is frozen and they can't move anymore, you don't know whether it's going to be as a result of the bandwidth, the speed problems, or whether the patient's really frozen in that position. So these are some kind of those problems that we will face, wouldn't they?
Coming back to the hospitals in Malaysia, all of them were hired in the Malaysian hospitals are information technology based, not the computer science. So if with the computer science graduate, they should know all this computer.
Exactly. And there are, of course, these special hospitals around the country, 7 if I'm not mistaken, which have been identified as satellite hospitals. Sorry, not just paperless, but they do some kind of the telemedicine blueprint, which kind of fizzled out, and then telehealth, then tele-primary care, and all that came about. Yes, the flagship hospitals. And at most, they were able to do static images. They're able to send an X-ray image over to their consultant at whichever hospital. But they had no clue that this could be a dynamic thing, you know.
Let us close the other topics as well. And
Yes, yes.
give a chance to the others also to express. Yes, please.
I have a couple, but since you told us not to talk about the possible solution, I have
Initially.
yes, I have problem explaining the problem. But anyway, okay. My concern is more related to rehabilitation of stroke patient.
Sorry, I forgot to ask your name again, so for our record.
Hello, I'm Azlin. I'm a physiotherapist by background, and my area is neurology rehab, specifically stroke rehabilitation. Okay, so my concern will be closely related to rehabilitation of the stroke patient, and I also have one idea for Parkinson actually. Okay, so a physiotherapist is one of the main rehab personnel for stroke patient. So through my experience and observation, we do spend a lot of time with the patient. And the problem is when we are not around, the patient is unable to continue whatever therapy given. The problem being that this kind of patient, they need lots of feedbacks and continuous feedbacks. So when we are not around, there's no one to actually warn them if they're doing wrong movement, if there's overactivity coming from the other side of the body. So in a therapy session, we take some time to actually correct this. Give them proper feedback that they should be moving this way, not this way. And
So sorry, you instruct the patient to move in some
in
specific way.
yes, in the specific correct way, because post neurology problem, many patient has altered movement.
Can you show us an example of movement that you ask the subject to do?
Okay, like stroke patient, when we ask them to try to move the hand,
Right.
what they do is there will be overactivity in the upper part, the shoulder. The shoulder will move first and will take over most of the activities in the lower part of the hand. That is one example. For example, if you ask them to reach for a pen, okay, so they will do this in their body. So this is abnormal movement which need to be corrected in order to get back the proper quality movement. So what we do is usually we have to put our hands on the overactive part to relax them, and then we have to give verbal feedback, verbal instruction on how to actually move. Plus, they have to also look at the object, focus. So when we are not around, the problem is patient will return to the abnormal movement again. So one possible solution, I still touch the solution, maybe some form of sensors
Like we call
to
it feedback sensors that we just mentioned.
something simpler than that that can be applied on the body, on the on specific parts to warn the patient that okay, this is not the proper way to move, something like that, or a detector of abnormal movement when the patient is trying to move for more functional movement. And if possible, the gadget can also be applied at home, because the reality is in our country, patients can't come as frequent as they should come. Yeah, so some kind of something to facilitate training at home with the absence of the therapist. So this little gadget can actually provide feedback, or maybe feedbacks. I'm talking mainly on feedbacks mechanism.
Is it the contraction or the movement of extra movement that is
It's
what-
the abnormal contraction which causes the abnormal movement. Yes, because post-neurology disorder, usually there's imbalance of muscle activity. So we want to try to minimize this overactivity of unwanted muscles, and so that patient can focus to move the correct muscle for certain movement. Otherwise, the movement will not be successful. So this is like into the detail of the movement training as physiotherapist. That is one thing. That is more talking about some kind of sensors to correct the movement. And another problem or another idea will be on how we can actually facilitate hand function for basic activities, such as for feeding, for drinking. Because in reality, stroke patients, they are able to flex and grip, but they cannot release or extend their fingers and their wrists. So if they can't do that, they can do this. It's difficult for them to hold, to let go, and to hold things. For example, if we give them a cup of drinks, so we want them to hold and bring it to the mouth for drinking. They can grip, but they can't open. So there's no way for them to be able to grasp that cup.
How do you help them now?
Okay, what we do in the rehab unit, we give them functional electrical stimulation. So when the intention is there, when they try to initiate the movement, the electrical stimulator will help them to complete the movement. So with that contraction, they're able to grasp, and that's it, stop there. So, but then they have ability to actually bend. The nice thing is they have the ability to flex either this way and this way. But when they cannot release or cannot extend, there's no way they can pick up an object to bring to their body. So I'm not sure whether there's a simple gadget to actually assist with that.
The FES does not have
The
functionality?
FES is mainly used in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
But
Something like to give to the patient.
yes, and FES is something more. It is everything is external gadget actually. But FES is more related to electrical current. But I was thinking if something more mechanical, meaning that, for example, okay, a patient has intention to extend the fingers, okay, but they can't do it fully, or they can't do it enough to hold an object. So if there's something to be applied on the patient hand, so that when they have that intention and they can initiate, the gadget help to complete the movement. And but not strong enough to hold the hand into this position, because to keep hand in this position is not functional also. But at the same time, the gadget allows the person to do opposite movement. So it's like, okay, somebody is helping the patient to open up the fingers so that they can grasp the thing, and now the patient can bring the things to the mouth for drinking or for eating. But the gadget is not holding the patient hard to limit the functional movement. Not sure whether you get mine.
Assisted.
Yes, yes, but this is okay.
Just myself to be clear on that, the skeletal, they support the assist, they do the assisted. Is this what you have in mind?
Yeah, I Google some. I tried to Google some information about this robotic. But what I found mainly is very huge gadget, non-mobile, and it's difficult to be used at home, and it is like very complex. So what I have in mind is a very simple, mechanical, user-friendly, not heavy.
Who will activate this mechanical system? Automatically activated?
It should be able to activate itself with some trigger. Yes, the trigger. Patient movement can be a trigger for that gadget. Okay, for example, I'm trying to pick this pen. Okay, I can't release my thumb and my index finger. So if it is enough for the gadget, a trigger. Okay, now I have the intention to open. So I just do a little bit, the gadget detect the movement and then helps to complete. But
Very complex.
yeah,
Training purposes.
this is for training and also for basic function like feeding, eating.
Could you use
Because
your
you do
other
not.
hand? Could you use your good hand to train the not so good?
But when it comes to the real muscle activity, it's difficult to use this hand.
No, honestly. So could you use something that, like you said, like a glove, that she was suggesting like using of a glove. So you use the glove like on the left hand, which is assuming it's your better hand. You put the glove in your right hand. So as this one is closing, this one also closes. With
Oh, that one
like
is-
a mirror thing.
That is more like training, right? Bilateral training task. Okay, we call that bilateral training, but that's basically for training the muscle activity. But this is more for functional, basic, daily use. Yes, it's like okay. It's like a prosthesis whereby when people don't have leg, they put that on, the prosthesis on, and they can walk again. But this is like okay, when they want to eat, they apply that thing, that whatever we call it.
Can the trigger be external? For example, let's say I have a very button, which I feel comfortable, I release.
What I have in mind is more like a spring. I don't know. Okay, a sensor.
These are fine movements. You're talking about
Yeah,
fine
but something to that attached to the fingers. Okay, when the fingers start to move, the thing complete the movement for the person. But not just complete and hold it, but when now patient want to flex, the thing let go. So it's like, I don't know, spring system maybe.
Let it to the workshop.
Yeah. Okay.
Luckily,
Alright, because stroke patients, although walking is a problem to them, but once they are able to walk with walking aids, they don't see that as main problem already. But those with poor hand function, they always tell us that they want to at least use the hand to feed themselves, because that will also reduce their self-efficacy, it a moral boost for them, like they can use their hand for basic function like eating and drinking. Okay. For Parkinson patient, it is also something to provide feedback to them, because they rely on vision and verbal feedbacks a lot. I'm not sure whether it could be some kind of game, virtual reality, you know.
What is the problem?
The problem is also related to movement. Example, when we want to train walking in them, we need to give lots of verbal feedback. Like, okay, take bigger step, bigger step, bigger step throughout the walking path while they are walking. And not just that, but also give them visual feedback in the sense that, okay, we paste footprints on the floor, so we want them to walk following the footprints. But when they are at home, they like almost bedridden. They don't do this kind of activities because there's no feedback system at home. So I'm not sure whether, and we can't really depend on carers because they are always busy. Some kind of therapy at home for them, for the patient.
You mean a system that would tell them to do more movements or adjust the movement at home?
To train them with this correct movement.
And the definition of correct movement, is it depending on the subject or is universal? Is it the same for everybody?
Can I just because Parkinson there's several levels of handicap. So if you can adjust that based on the level, the therapy system that use vision, that use auditory system, that could be a difficult part because it may involve systems. Okay, I think my last one. I have actually developed home-based therapy module for stroke patient, and at the moment I have put this in a website, but the website is not quite ready for this stroke patient. I'm wondering how I can turn this paper-based, image-based into more animation kind of thing. Right now there's image and there's instruction, but the image is static. I'm wondering how I can get the image to move so that patient knows, okay, how exactly to move. Give you example, 3D animation from the static image. I was told that it can be done. You don't have to create new one. You can just use the static one. I don't know, and turn that into animation so that rather than depending on the written instruction, patient can click and then the movement occur for them. They can see the movement in order for them to do at home. Because this home-based exercise module has been tested in my PhD, so we got good favorable results in terms of effectiveness and also cost effectiveness. The problem is to take this into more interesting approach.
So your stress is on animation. You want to have this animation, dynamic animation of the subjects that will show, okay, you do this movement this way and that way. Is that correct?
When we did the training, we have to demonstrate. we have to demonstrate to the patient, and the patient has to try to remember as much as they can. And when they go home, we give them the booklet, so it's static. So
I take a MPEG file in your movie,
the video,
the video,
video.
of you in action or colleague doing the thing.
Uh,
That's all. I mean, I'm trying to understand the problem.
It could solve actually at the first, initially I was, somebody suggested to me to use video, but I don't know, I prefer diagrams than video. And now somebody suggested to me that, okay, maybe you can turn this picture into animation. I'm not sure whether that is doable. That's it.
Basically, you want something interactive. Because say video is not suitable for this like one way approach. Oh,
But in terms of the size, it will give you the larger size, and it will slow down the access, slow down the process.
that could be you want what spread use.
When I introduce sometimes ago a software that we make Go Animate that can do the thing, but it's not exactly what from what I understand from your description, you have a set of templates showing the position of the subject in some specific instance. So you would like the system to transform this to an animation. So you would start and you would give the end and it extrapolates for you, okay, this is how you do the movement and so on.
Replace the person who has to demonstrate the activity. Because these are sets of activities, actually, not just posture.
Thank you very much.
Anyone down the row, I think the plan.
Okay, thank you, finally. Alright, well, it's okay, ladies. Right, just what, before sorry, I'm Arimi Fitri. I'm in exercise physiology and gerontology. Before I started for my problem, just one extension from Dr. Azlin just now. Since she mentioned about all the device to detect all the movement things, and that's mostly for patient. And I was thinking that we need some sort of device. Well, we have well-designed ergonomic chairs, but we still have a problem with the wrong postures among office workers. Even wrong posture when we walk, when we sitting down, when we holding things. And at least we can tackle the right posture, the wrong posture during sitting down in the office. If we have the device to detect that, then we have the monitor to tell, well, you are leaning to the right, you are leaning to the front, so you have to correct the posture, then will be good. That's one thing. And the second one is my actual problem is, well, actually, this meeting is slightly a little bit too late for me because I just discussed about this problem with one biomedical engineers in UM. However, I would like to share the problem. During my intervention, exercise intervention with elderly, I used this resistant tube, elastic resistant tube. Then we taught the subject to do the exercise, and until the subject knows how to do exercise, then I let them to do at home, sort of home-based exercise training for them to do at home. But then the problem with the resistant tube, it comes in one length, and then when we adjust the length, the resistance is different. And then different exercises for different muscle group require different length of the tube. And we do, so far we don't have that device which can tell, okay, you need this length for your squat, you need this length for your bicep curl. So we don't have that. That's one thing, that we need the device which can tell, we can preset, or some things like we can set the device so that the patient, the subject will know the exact length to use when they are at home. That's one thing. And also, when it comes to the home-based intervention, especially for the exercise or the physical intervention, is always the main concern is the compliance. We can tell them to do exercise, we can ask them to do anything, but when it comes to compliance, we can't really monitor them unless we put CCTV at home. But then we are not be able to do that. So that's my main problem when it comes to the home-based intervention. When I discuss with these biomedical engineers in we are in the process of applying a grant to design a device which can as a counter device, and also a device to tell the subject, because my intervention mostly on elderly, then elderly normally with no sounds, not something like to give that motivation to keep doing exercise. We are trying to design a device which can serve as a counter and also produce a sounds to tell the subject that they reach certain resistance, or they reach certain count, so that they can keep doing the exercise as what we suggested to them. So we are in the process to produce that device actually. Well, still in very early stage, but yeah, if I joined this meeting before I met her, then definitely I will engage with this program. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Remy. Starting by the last item, perhaps there is an existing solution. I'm sure you are aware of. Have you heard of BitFit?
Yes.
Okay. So if you are familiar with this, that's all. The second one, I'm trying to understand the problem, the length. You want to measure the length of the muscle?
No. The length of the tube, resistant tube.
What is the problem? The problem is that the tube, right?
All right, because the tube, when we give the tube to the subject, it comes with one length.
Why do you give the tube to the subject? We are not familiar with your problem.
You have to explain.
Yes.
Sorry, the tube is for the exercise at home,
It's
home-based
elastic
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 tube.
tube. So what do they do like this?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay. And you want them to extend this tube?
Yes.
No, the thing is, the tube resistance will change, of course. If you grab it closer, it will be very hard to pull out. So there will be more strength. The longer you have, so that will less. So there will be less.
Like springs?
Yes,
that
exactly.
use-
It's a spring.
Okay.
So he is saying that now that the patients are not able to know what length, where to put their fingers to have the right attention, right? So that he is trying to get.
I cannot put marks on the rubber or whatever it is to say, okay, if you want this tension, you put on this mark on the tube. Is it?
And again, the tension for the tube itself is very. We don't have the subjective device to measure the tension. If possible, that we can have a device which can, when we extend the tube, then we will know what is the tension, what is the strength of the tube. That will be much better. Well, one thing is,
I tell you, that can be already, that has already been calculated, because the tube
It's calibrated.
is calibrated, yes. It is calibrated.
yeah.
For the certain length is the tension. And if you look at TerraBands, they have different colors
Yeah.
for different tensions. So they put colors.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes, correct. Correct.
So we have yellow for 10 kilograms, red for 20 kilograms. But again, that's maybe other is telling us how to tell the patient that you have to put the fingers here and here, 1 feet from, because they won't be able to. Maybe you can say that you can have markers. That is not probably.
postures at work, you want to monitor people or you want to educate them?
Not just monitor, just like for self-monitoring. Then you can just like put on a chair or something that. Then when you can, some things like the device that detect when you are falling asleep when you are driving. It's similar like that, just for the posture.
Can I add to that?
Yes, sure, please.
Actually, I missed that out too. The sensor, some kind of sensor to detect poor posture. And related to stroke is the asymmetry of posture. Because when they sit more on one side. So if there is something that can actually educate them and give awareness to them that they are sitting on one side only, they are not using the other side of the body. So every time they sit on one side of the body, it will trigger some kind of alarm system, alarm, and to tell them, okay, you are sitting wrongly.
Basically, it's more or less the same problem, is the statement, but
To apply to different population.
It's a relevant problem. One of the important problems is the others.
There's none then. I'm the last.
I have one more.
I'm Devinda from Physiotherapy Department. Lately we have been doing some research with virtual reality games, and we find that compliance of patients or people to exercise is much better because it's much interesting. And so we were thinking of, how can we do more therapy-based type of virtual reality. For example, we have a lot of games that we can play, but we don't have things like certain tasks that we want to do. So in stroke patients or in geriatrics, sometimes they have difficulty to, just do sit to stand. They can't come up to standing and then they can't go down to sitting properly. So in therapy sessions, we normally tell them, okay, you need to sit with your both feet backwards a bit. Okay, bring your body forward and then push and come up. Something like how we also train the stroke patients. And these movements have to be done repeatedly many times to get some neurological training happening. And so we were thinking if we can have this kind of task in a virtual reality where the patient can get some feedback on their own and they can do this therapy in virtual reality on their own at home, it would be really good. So for example, if they can do this training on their own connected to virtual reality and they are able to train many times, and this virtual reality also has some feedback like correcting their postures, the asymmetry in them. Plus another thing is connecting it to tele-rehab. So not only they are doing it by virtual reality training, it is also connected to tele-rehab where we can also monitor them and we get some feedback on whether they are doing it correctly. This was the idea. We actually were already approached by someone in Australia, Doc University, some software engineer who is interested to do it. So we gave them the idea of task orientated, how it should be done, what kind of movements we are talking about, like sit to stand. They did apply for a grant, but it didn't work out. So we are now again with nothing. So we don't know whether we can move forward with.
Let me ask you a few questions to get a better understanding. So the idea is to have, again, this, can I say that this joins the posture, posture monitoring, posture recording, and compare it with the reference that you have defined.
Yes.
Saying that, okay, this you are doing this wrong, and you correct it back, position, foot position, something like that.
And
you want to posture on all limbs, usually, because it's not only the back now. or the hand,
Yeah.
the feet,
Yes.
or the posture.
Yes, if you're doing a task, then you need to monitor the whole body, you see. That is one, and because we are thinking of virtual reality, because you know, when you're doing this, you actually want the person you train to see, because you want all the extra feedback, visual feedback, you want auditory feedback, you want, you know, sensory feedback for the people to do it the right way, and all this feedback helps. We have tried balance games, you know, just skiing, and that improves your balance. So why not we do task-orientated therapy-like movements for virtual reality? Yeah, we have used Xbox to train people, but it's like, you know, patients don't have it, you know, so we just do it for research reasons, and that's it. It's a natural death after that. So how we can take this further so that we can have, you know, something that we can take home to comply with therapy as well.
So from what I can see is that if the sweep system is available to gauge posture, it has many
Movements,
applications.
posture.
It has many applications.
Yeah, and linked to telerehab again, then, you know, we can monitor them at home. They don't have to come for therapy. Yeah, my second issue is we have been doing a large-scale false risk assessment among older adults, and the only instrument that is which is false risk. Okay, the main thing is that we do not have a standard or a goal standard equipment to measure, and what is the best is something called physiological profile assessment, where they have 5 assessments. They have visual assessment, they have vestibular assessment, which is balance, and they have strength measurements, they have proprioception measurement, joint sense measurement, and the final one is hand reaction test. And this is a very crude equipment. You know, you just use a hand reaction test with a computer, you know, mouse, something like a mouse light, and every time you see this one, you need to. So you take all these measurements, and then you have these balance measurements where you put in a belt and you actually strap it up to a pencil, and the participant have to stand on a sponge to make the person unbalanced. And when they move, the pencil behind will just sketch on a graph paper, and then you need to count the number of, you know, how far it went, and, you know, you take all this and you put into a software, and this software is already available in Australia by one of the groups in the University of Melbourne. And then you need to calculate the false risk, and the false risk software they have developed based on normative data, large base Australian older adults. So what we are doing now is measuring against the Australian data. But I was just thinking of, you know, one instrument just measuring balance, and we have a Pro Balance board. It is from Singapore, so it measures just balance forwards and backwards, bilateral, forward, backwards, and sideways, and it just tells you the angles of movement that the patient or the participant has. So, but it can't tell you the false risk because you just know the person's balance, how much they move. So I was thinking of, you know, if we can, you know, have a balance board that can measure these movements of balance, and then we also have a software that, I'm sorry, I'm telling you the solution actually, and the problem. So if we can have a software as well that is also based on the normative data, then we can actually identify people who are outside the scale of this balance to say that they have false risk maybe.
Is it normative data that is applicable to Australians, applicable to Richard?
Probably not, because the height is different, the statue may be different. So, but we are that's the best we have now. And there's 5 tests, and this 5 tests takes a lot of time.
So you have one of them, which
I have one. The Pro Balance board, I don't have it. I actually borrowed it from Singapore. And, that can balance, or maybe even the 5 together. Visual, vestibular, that is balance. And then it's strength of your muscle. It's your joint sense, whether you know where your joint is in space.
How do you do that?
Presently, we are doing it with, it's just like a goniometer, a big, huge thing, and then we ask the participant to place one feet and then try to place the other feet on the same spot. And with looking. If they can't place it in the same space, that means there is a discrepancy, the joint sense has a problem.
Which is the fifth one?
The fifth one is a hand reaction test. How fast is their reaction? So if they have slow reaction, they are more prone to fall. So all this data is collected separately in 5 systems and put into a software and calculated false risk. So if we can have it like,
Do you have the algorithm of the software?
no. They will not give it to you.
This is another project.
Yeah, then
About 6 projects at the same time.
yeah, there's a long way to go, but
Can this system be used for the Parkinson patients? Because we are talking about movement
Yes.
assessment.
yeah, if it can measure this balance, then it can measure. It can measure throughout many, but their normative data may be slightly different. Another issue with Parkinson is the freezing period. Freezing period.
Freezing.
Yes, because we do not have anything in hand right now to actually detect this freezing period. But this is one factor which can actually contribute to falls. Imagine if patient is walking and then suddenly the freezing period comes during walking, so patient froze. So what would be the posture at that time? It really depends. So again, maybe a detector to tell the patient you are about to freeze. You are about to freeze. Okay, so sit down, something like that.
What's that intent function, that magical. Yes.
It's mainly like using the physiological changes related to the freezing episode and to tell the patient, to give feedback to the patient, okay, this is happening soon. Okay, now be prepared, something like that.
Here's the problem.
We have taken work of 17 projects, exactly the same number that another one? So you beat the medical faculty. Yes, please.
This is a very simple thing. Actually, probably this problem occurs to all of us. I'm talking about cigarette smokers in public areas. If you are there among the people who are smokers and they're smoking in restaurants or in public spaces, I mean, you can't say, okay, please stop smoking. You can't do that. I mean, nobody does it. Nobody does it. Right? So I'm thinking about appliance, actually a cigarette smoker deterrent appliance. Perhaps a sound device, or lights, I mean, I don't know what. This is just an engineering.
Perhaps just an app that you can switch on. Please don't smoke.
Then the person knows that you are doing it.
But you can hide the
I'm talking about something like a smoke detector somewhere. I mean, if the restaurant owner is conscious about this, is concerned about this, his customers, just put it up on his several places, you know. And the moment the detector detects smoke, cigarette smoke, they'll say, okay, somebody here is smoking, can you please, you know, for the concern of other customers, please.
You buy that.
Yeah, I mean,
Available. Or even in boards, like forums, this smoke and you know, like
yeah.
they sneak out and smoke, so that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, just short of saying, please, go on, please stop smoking. I can't, I mean, you don't do that. I mean, you can't have that to tell people, you don't to tell people like that. But if you have a device to say that, then they will. And I really get pissed off. Smokers around me. So that's one.
They can have that in the buses.
Yeah, but it's a public experience.
The public areas.
I don't know what you think about it. That's a problem. The other problem is regarding health records. You know, when you go see different doctors, your records stay with that clinic or that hospital.
This brings topic of EMR you're talking about, right? Electronic medical records.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about these records could be either with the patient or in the cloud. I mean, someone's. Oh, yeah. And these records, of course, has to be controlled. It should not be free for all. So you can have confidential at different levels. So if physio sees or if a speech therapist sees, they can only see certain information relevant to what they need, right? For this particular patient. So, and the patient also has a password to allow the particular provider to see access. So, I'm seeing this problem when we treat a lot of patients who shop around with different doctors and they get all sorts of treatments, different medications, and they don't even know what they're taking. You know? And this is something problem for us to continue to manage. I think this works for everyone. You can extend it.
There's a lot of hospital-based medical record systems. But I keep hearing the same thing everywhere I go. They said we don't have one. We worry about security. But for example, AT&T PAC system, it's so complete and in fact up to your mobile. You can look at your patients in your mobile. I am looking at if a doctor from private practice is talking about it, then it's highly better because they can't afford to have a machine or system. But what if the problem is faced by like a UKM, UKM's kind of setting? So what is the real problem?
For example, if you have it in UKM and you have patients that come into our clinic, you can access.
You can access in your apps, in your mobile phone actually. They have a server, hospital-based, internet-based, apps-based application.
So we probably could, I think that's an internal thing where the permissibility of someone who is not within the hospital setting, while we're within UKM, the permissions to access medical records remain with the hospital and not to external
Normally you have to register with the hospital, that's the practice. If you register with the server or the hospital, then you will have access for the information that you need. For example, the ENT has done something and referred to you, and they will actually click your name out, you will appear as the speech therapy there. When the patient comes to you, you can actually access the portion that you need.
We are not in that system. They are not registered.
Yeah.
If you were registered to solve that problem.
But that's only for a particular hospital. What if the patient
You know,
goes-
each hospital you have to register.
That's the
No,
problem.
if not, that's not going to work because the security issue will be there. For example, let's say KKM has got the system, all the KKM hospitals, they must have agreement, interrelated, and doctors must be registered. So if referral is done by the KKM hospital, they need to select the doctor who is referred, then they can get access.
I'm talking about, say, for example, the patient goes to a private hospital, then goes to clinic.
Okay, these will security issues will come in. So if anybody can sell data. If they go to private hospital, then patient, okay, what I suggested in what one of the presentation at the ETP, for the ETP grant, we suggest patient to be responsible for their data. So they are given a password. So they go to private hospital, they can actually put up their password and the doctor can view their own records.
But that is to be also, there's a different levels in that. You know, of course, the main hospital has a complete
Whatever you can give to the patient, then it will be under the patient availability. The patient can actually view, their family members can view, their doctors can view, and so on. So this is what the patient can do. More than that, you request.
Anyone else got any ideas?
Like, there's only like a few of us that are here actually. So if we actually take this back, I'm sure you will have a lot.
Well, this is exactly what happened last time. But for the moment, in order to get something out of this, we have done our best to take notes. But I will ask you kindly to fill in these forms for us and put again in your own words the ideas that you shared with us. And if you can, add a priority kind of or severity in the issue that you are, let's say you have two projects, you say this is extremely, I'm sure for example for you have expressed different levels of complexity and different levels of priority as well. Okay? So some of the projects may have higher priority in mind than other projects. And the next step would be for us to compile all this information, and in the second round, we will get back to you on a personal basis, which means we'll kind of link you with one of the HTI committee members so that they can dig and get more information from your side. Is this what you meant? Have we understood it properly so that we can get more information from your side? And for example, you are telling us that in Australia they are doing this way, so what is the website? We get some more information, and we compile and append all of this information for the benefit of the participants in the workshop. So when they will have to do the screening and the concept generation and all the brainstorming, they don't have to spend time to go and fetch this information. So the main thing is for us to get back these forms as complete as you can think. Please feel free to put any extra information. Because one piece of information is affordability. Let's say I'm saying that I need something that can measure time, but it's good to tell us that do we want to spend 10 ringgit per patient to make this affordable, or 100 ringgit is okay, or 1,000 ringgit is okay? How much is okay? Because any type of solution will be coming at a cost. So it's important for the participants also to know that how much, what is the severity of the problem in terms of budget also.
Just to repeat what I said earlier. So what we do with the UKM is we had a short say advertisement at faculty meeting, so everyone, because that's when you get everyone to be there. Yeah, that's how we got the feedback. But it's up to how it can be done here.
So please feel free, I think the message from Dr. Ashani is that feel free free if you think that exposing the others, please act as our ambassadors to the other colleagues who might be interested. The only thing is to clearly explain what is the objective, and especially avoid an unfounded expectation. Meaning to say that whatever I put here, I put it to you and you come later on with the solution. That is not the way it works. We made it clear last night. We will put all of these ideas to the workshop participants. And if you are around, if you attend the workshop, then this will enhance the networking and the communication will be much easier, and then for you to follow up your ideas also will be much easier. That is the idea.
What I do in the presentation to them is, for example, now you are presenting 70. If you of you can come, then we can add some activity participants to that group.
We can form a group concentrated on speech therapy or on some posture, because I feel that there are problems that are more represented than others. It's open.
That's another good project. Reading of doctor's writing, translating doctor's writing to medical doctors.
Yeah, we tried.
That's a very
Can I just ask one question? From my understanding, through the workshop, you will try to provide us with the concept, the engineering concept, right? Because we need that concept to bring the project further to further stage. What about the engineering personnel following that? Like you mentioned about master student, masters for health technology, HTI, whether we will be able to actually work with them or to get some kind of assistance from them in order to get the project into further stage if it is selected.
I use the presentation, I think. Just take a few minutes. So this is our first, let me share this with you. This is snapshots from our first workshop. This is the Sugoi Feng, he's a fellow at Bar Design Stanford. This is the Ashani. And this is a workshop that is the leader. And then it is the electronic, and this is the mechanical parts. Okay, so the second one, this is how we are going to do the second workshop. We are going to expose, talk about the basics, and then we will do a round of need identification. Then we will go to the need screening. So need identification communication actually is based on what we have been doing here. We are trying to accelerate this pace because usually in the original program, this is between 4 to 6 weeks of internship. The engineers, they go into the hospitals and they shadow you. They kind of follow you, and then they have to come up with over 100 topics. So this is what we are doing right now. Need screening. Available tools will be to expose you as participants to what is available in terms of technical tools that are available in Malaysia, and you can afford to use these tools: electronic tools, mechanical tools, material tools, etc. Concept generation. This is where the engineering team also will be helping, and concept screening is also when we are going to select the concept. So once this has been done, you have, if your project has been successfully passed all these stages, you have a concept that has great chances to be feasible, to be transformed into a real prototype. Now, the question of who is going to do that is still on the table, because we hope that you will be able to make links, you will make a network with the technical people who will be attending. So these technical people are us, ourselves. All the committee members are not around. Some of them, they had appointments, they could not join us. And we are going also to involve the graduate students. So we open this up to the graduate students from engineering, from information technology, and from even the graduate school of business. So depending on how the response will be, there will be some of them attending this meeting. But it will be up to you to use this network, to form a network, to apply for a grant, whatever you feel that is suitable. Take on the project. I think you have these slides, huh? I already emailed these slides, so this is the basics, identification, what we do in this stage. For example, in the concept screening, we are going to look at various aspects. Let's say, is this manufacturable? You have a concept, but you cannot manufacture it easily. You wouldn't know. The engineers will know, and they will come in. How reliable is that? Can it be tested easily? And another aspect that the business and economy people are interested in is in terms of IP and regulations that are around this device. If, as you know, let's say in the North American continent, FDA is very strict on items that you want to use with patients. So what's the kind of environment that you are faced with within Malaysia? If we do this, then can you easily pass through the various ethical obstacles that do exist, etc., etc. And at the end, let's say you want to, how are you going to generate the income from this? And this joins the idea from the new VC, because he's keen on this kind of innovation and generating streams of revenue from innovation of research projects within UCAN. Hopefully you can do that.
Can I just make a comment from maybe just to simplify what the workshop is about. So the workshop is about a method to take from the problem and hopefully find a solution which can be taken further as an innovative project. So the disclaimer is if you want something concrete out of it, then it needs some further work. So this is the main outcome of the workshop, the methodology. Is that right?
Yeah, the main outcome is the methodology, the way we approach projects, but hopefully we can come also with concepts and network and other things.
But we are not saying that every problem we have discussed here we find a solution. Okay.